Welcome to the Quantum Healthy podcast. I'm Andeea, a licensed addiction counselor, and along with my co-host, Laura Kissman, a quantum nutritionist, we will be inviting expert scientists, clinicians, survivors, and thrivers to distill their pearls of wisdom attained from applying quantum biology to their fields of research and everyday lives. Our goal is to bring you easy to understand principles and practices about the study of light, water, and magnetism so you can take your health into your own hands. This episode is sponsored by VIVARAYS, the only eyewear company that truly understands your biology. VIVARAYS are advanced blue light glasses designed with circadian biology in mind. Unlike typical blue blockers, they filter light in harmony with your body's natural rhythms, helping you sleep deeper, feel more energized, and protect your long-term health. We love companies that support biology-backed wellness, and VIVARAYS is leading the way. Use code QUANTUMHEALTHY at VIVARAYS.com to save 15% and support your sleep, focus, and natural energy the way nature intended. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to Quantum Healthy Podcast, everyone. We have R. Blank back for his second interview with us, technically third because we were actually on his podcast. And if you don't know who he is the CEO of Shield Your Body, whose mission is to make technology safer. And with hundreds and thousands of customers in over 30 countries and having interviewed on platforms ranging from ABC television to ElectricSense, R is an internationally followed expert on issues of EMF, health, and safety. And he was inspired to create Shield Your Body when he co-authored the best-selling book Overpowered with his father, Martin R. Blank, who's one of the world's leading EMF scientists, and his degrees come from Columbia University and UCLA. Welcome back to the podcast, R.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you both.
We are so happy to have you back on. Now, we had you on our podcast episode 15 for people who want to go back, and that one is titled Effects of Non-Native EMFs and How to Shield Your Body. Now, that podcast, everyone, goes a little bit more into the science, and today we're going to be speaking a little bit different about this topic, but the reason is because you have a new book out. So
yes.
Your new book is Empowered, and this sounds like obviously a sequel to Overpowered, and it's described as a consumer guide to legitimate EMF protection to shield your body. So congratulations on writing this book. I cannot wait to purchase it. What inspired you to write it?
Okay, so thank you so much for that introduction. What inspired me to write it is my experience of now a dozen years answering customer questions at Shield Your Body. And particularly in the last couple of years where my catalog of products at shieldyourbody.com has grown to, I think today it's like 250 different products. And so I know that consumers have difficulty understanding what EMF really is, how EMF protection really works, how they should be approaching EMF protection. And then also you get through to a consumer and they know they should do something, and then they come to a store and there's 250 options, and they're where do I begin? What do I need? What do I invest in, and how do I actually make sure it's the right thing for me? And so I realized there's a kind of this same challenge with so many different consumers, and the approach that I advocate is really just never been talked about in a book or really publicly. You'll have some people who talk about their own products. You'll have some people who focus really on the behavioral changes that are very important to EMF mitigation, but no one had provided a comprehensive, holistic approach to EMF self-defense that walks through how to understand and talk about the science, how to measure these forces, how your behavior really impacts your exposure levels, and then how EMF protection products, how to determine which ones are actually real versus bogus, how they actually work, and which ones are worth considering investing in. And again, I do talk a lot about products in the book, although I definitely emphasize behavioral change, but I don't just talk about my own products. Again, because my store is now so big and includes, I think, as of today, 16 different brands, I am able to give more of a wider perspective on the different types of products that are out there. And so what inspired me was this information didn't exist, and I knew consumers needed it. And I felt like it was important to get it out there.
Amazing.
So, full disclosure, it's a long book, and Andeea and I are not fully through it. I think in the PDF version that we have, it's like 530 pages.
So it's shorter than that now. So it's about 420 pages, which is still not short, but it is designed really to be accessible. Like if you want to read it front to back, you can. Obviously, I'm happy if you do. And it's very clearly written, so you're not going to get bogged down in odious writing, but it is structured in a way where you don't have to read it front to back. It can be used as a resource, a reference guide. And so it's broken into 5 parts and 27 chapters. And so you can just dive into like if you just want to learn about what the science says, that's chapter 2. If you want to learn how to make EMF protection, how to protect yourself from Wi-Fi radiation, that's, I forget what number chapter, 21, I think. But there's just, you jump to that chapter. So the chapter headings are very clearly identified. If you want to learn how to test so that you can figure out where you want to focus your efforts, then you jump to the testing chapter. And so you don't have to read it front to back, but it is designed in this way where, again, you can jump to the chapters that are the most important for you personally.
And another thing that probably adds to the length, which is a bit deceiving, is it's highly, highly referenced. And what I loved about it, which was different from a lot of books, was the references are on the page. As you're reading it, you look to the bottom, or the next, top of the next page, whatever. The references will be there. I found when I was reading it, I've heard of all these different studies by Henry Lai and Singh and Martin Paul and Dr. Martin Paul, and and it was so neat to just go, oh wow, it's there. I can go look at. We pretty much click on it, whatever, or just throw it in my browser, right?
Yeah.
So that's another thing that it's not as long as you think because it's so highly referenced, which is wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And so yes, there are they're footnotes rather than endnotes. So if you're reading it in paperback or hardcover, you'll see the references right there on the same page where they're referenced. If you're reading on Kindle, they'll be grouped at the end of the chapter. That's just how it works on Kindle. There's no way to put them on the page.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So full disclosure, we're not fully through it. I know I got sucked into the science and the health effects. I couldn't read through that. And I thought it'd be kind of neat if we could to maybe, I wish I'd have more time to design this, but to kind of go through the parts just quickly. And then I think we'd like to focus on a little bit on the cell phone and the addiction, that piece a little bit, but we want to make sure we cover, so people really at the end of this will go, oh man, I have to get this book or it's not the book, right? So part 1 is understanding electromagnetic frequencies. You've broken it into 4 chapters. What is EMF? Why does it matter? Chapter 2, the health effects. That's the one I got completely sucked in. I kind of skip read the electrohypersensitivity because I've known quite a bit about it, but I'll go back when I get the book. But for some people, that will be so enlightening, that chapter. And then 4 is why the science seems unsettled. Any highlights you want to bring out from those chapters?
Sure. Yeah. So
chapter 4,
like you were saying, part 1 is understanding EMF, and that explains what EMF is, what the health effects are. It's to provide the sort of the basic understanding of these forces. And so if you're not familiar with these ideas or these terms, you understand them as you go through the rest of the book. So this isn't a book about the science, as we've spoken about, right? And our last interview was much more about the science than this one is. But it's a book based in science. And so I felt it was important, if this is the only book that someone picks up on this topic, that they understand that there's a lot of this science and what that science is telling us. Then the second part, like you said, is about evaluating exposure, and that's to help people understand, right? Because this force is invisible, it's odorless, you can't feel it or touch it or taste it. And so having ways for consumers and readers to understand how they can gauge what their exposures are, that's why that part exists.
And you touch on the paradox, which I thought was really good, because so many of us are so fast to go all non-native or non-natural electromagnetic frequencies are bad, right? Avoid them all. That's it.
Yeah, well, to me, that was important to include, because I think it's just absolutely so ludicrous when you hear people argue that this stuff, these forces, are biologically inert. And, you know, that chapter, the paradox of healing and harm, that talks about several medical technologies that are in wide use and universally accepted by doctors and completely non-controversial, that rely on dosing you with EMF radiation to address physical maladies or disease. So there's cancer treatments, there's bone treatments, there's nerve treatments, there's neuro treatments, and it's just these things wouldn't work if EMF were biologically inert. So the fact that the medical establishment sees that, yeah, EMF exposure impacts the body, impacts biology, it's just obvious, and it gives immediate lie to the claim that this stuff is harmless, that it can't impact living things. An honest review of the science would already tell you that that's obviously bogus. But let's step past that for a second. These medical technologies, some of which are life-saving technologies, they wouldn't work if what the critics or the skeptics say is true. Sorry, yeah, that's why that chapter exists.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see, chapter. Yeah, okay. And then I'm glad you take some time to go through the EMF regulations, and you summarized it so well. Like in the US, it's the regulatory, agencies are the FCC, and then I think you mentioned ICNIRP, right? The International Commission on, what is it?
Non-ionizing radiation protection.
Radiation. Yeah, and so many people. That's kind of like, it's based in, you mentioned it, based in Germany, but it's kind of recognized internationally, but it's closely related to the World Health Organization.
I believe it's part of the World Health Organization.
Part of it. Okay.
And they're the group that have established the standards on which organizations like the FCC in the United States build exposure regulations.
Right. And how, are they compromised? You skirted it. You didn't go into, but you gave enough information.
No, and I actually have kept edit. Still, after you got the book,
okay.
I continued to edit, so I don't remember which version you have. In the release version, the version that's available, I don't skirt around it when it comes at least to the FCC. So that's the regulatory, that's the organization that establishes the cell phone radiation regulations in the United States. And it is well documented that they are what Harvard has published, called in published work, a captured agency. And they are the poster child for regulatory capture, where people from corporations and business enter government, set regulations, and then go back into private industry through this revolving door. And so when it comes to the FCC, that has been very well documented. And in the release version of the book, I definitely talk about that quite a bit. When it comes to ICNERP, I'm not as familiar, but I do know that their standards are based on what is called the thermal effect. And that is, they are designed to protect you. The thermal effect is when there's enough of this radiation, when it's powerful enough, it can heat your tissue. And when you're heating tissue, that is very dangerous. That is carcinogenic. And this is how microwave ovens work, right? They have so much of this EMF radiation that it can actually cook your food. And so all of these regulations that ICNERP focuses on are based around the thermal effect, and they don't protect you against risks from exposure at levels lower than would heat your tissue. And so that's the fundamental problem with ICNERP, and it is that they are out of date. I mean, the knowledge that is based on is now decades out of date, and it has not caught up.
Yeah, and
then,
this topic of regulations, I actually heard you say that you're not that optimistic, but a different.
I know which interview you're talking about now.
yeah,
Yeah.
And
French Canadian.
Yeah, Andre. Yeah.
Andre. I don't know him, but I was quite impressed.
Well, you talked about, and I would love for you to tell the audience about why you're not optimistic and the fact that why you took a certain approach to this book and teaching people how safe it can be. And I'd love to hear you explain to the audience it was more about companies relying on.
Yeah, well, so I am not optimistic. Well, I think like most Americans right now, I'm not very optimistic in terms of the government's ability to do much. I'm speaking there, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. I think that pessimism is quite well shared. But then when it comes to something like EMF in particular, the corporate interests are just so powerful. The amount of money that is in play when it comes to EMF emitting technologies. I mean, the wireless companies were already negatively influencing the science and deploying the tobacco playbook back in the 80s and 90s. And that's when it was just firms like Motorola and Nokia, which were big. But today, if you look at the top 10 most valuable companies in the world, 8 of them rely almost entirely on exposing consumers to EMF radiation in order to build and drive revenue. Right? Because it's not just the cell phone companies anymore. You can't buy something on Amazon without being exposed to EMF. You can't do a Google search and thus be delivered an ad that pays for everything at Google. You can't do that without exposing yourself to EMF. So the number of ways, the number of companies now that are financially dependent on exposing you to EMF in order to make money, it's almost every company in the world. And so I look at the top 10, just to give some perspective and focus on this. 8 of the top 10 make almost all of their revenue by exposing you to EMF. And the combined market capital of those 8 companies alone is $1.4 trillion. And that's just today, it'll grow. And again, that's just 8 companies. They're the biggest ones, but then you go down the list, and once again, it's 80% of these companies are dependent on exposing you to EMF. So the corporate interests are so heavily biased towards forestalling, delaying any additional recognition of the health risks that's why I don't have much optimism in terms of regulatory change. But I do have faith that companies want to make money. And that's why there's the same market forces that are creating the hurdles towards regulatory change are those very same market forces that we as consumers can influence. Because there's 2 reasons companies will do something they don't want to do. One is regulation, and the other is consumer demand. And so if regulation is not going to change, then consumer demand has to change. And if enough consumers start demanding safer products from a perspective of EMF exposures, then companies will start making safer products. And so there is, Laura, you asked some chapters that I particularly like more than, maybe than others. One of them is how companies, I'm trying to look here which number it was,
Oh, I think I
but
know.
it's how companies can make safer
Yes.
products.
Hang on. I'll find
It's chapter 13, how companies could make products safer. And that chapter isn't about EMF protection at all. It is about the design decisions that companies make that influence the amount of egregious and extraneous radiation exposures that we have. And then that chapter profiles, I believe it's 8 different products.
I think saw six in our version.
Okay, yeah.
I
So
was going to ask you about that.
yeah, where these companies are deploying, all they've done is just redesign the product, and it then exposes the consumer to much less radiation while still providing the same performance, right? So one of them in there that a lot of your listeners may already have is the Aura Ring. Another one is a low EMF router. Another one is a low EMF baby monitor. So an Aura Ring. So I talk about how that was designed differently than other health trackers, and as a result exposes you to almost no EMF, whereas other health trackers are exposing you to very significant levels whenever you're wearing them. So there are different design decisions that companies could be making in order to make these products safer, and they're only going to do it, again, when forced by regulatory change or consumer demand. And I am not optimistic about regulatory change, but I am very optimistic that it is possible to educate consumers in order just to demand that these products be safer. It's not like they have to be worse. It's not even like it costs more to do it this way. It just, there needs to be market demand.
I wrote a lot of quotes and things. I love this book. I can't say enough about this book, but this might help some a bit. But you wrote, EMF safety guidelines are built on outdated science, enforced through conflicted systems, and focused on protecting corporate infrastructure and not human health. Yeah, I love that you did not hold back, and it sounds like the newer versions you've gone even stronger. So, and Andeea and I have this. It's not a joke. It's a T-shirt that I've actually worn on podcasts, and it's Fearless AF. I don't know if you know what the AF is, but I'm just gonna say right now, after everything you've said in the first 20 minutes here, you deserve this T-shirt for writing this book and saying, yeah, you're Fearless AF.
But I would also, I guess it's fair to say I don't mince words in this book, but I just state things that are factual and I don't get worked up about them. So the tone is not angry. The tone is definitely not fear-based. It's just stating facts. Just like it's a fact that the reason we're exposed to so much EMF radiation and a growing amount each year is because it is profitable to do so. And, you can say things like that are accurate in a way that I think is easier for consumers to accept when it's said that way, in that tone, just cleanly, plainly, without anger or fear.
No,
Yeah.
nice.
This makes me think about I won't name names, but a political figure who's saying that everyone should have a wearable device on, and then people who don't know about, who aren't educated about this topic, hopefully this podcast reaches them in some way, will just look at that as, oh, it's safe because they told us that we should do it.
Right. Yeah. And I know obviously who you're talking about. And that person is actually aware of the EMF issue, but clearly doesn't understand it sufficiently. But I think to the further on the point we were just talking about, it is possible to have a wearable that is much, much safer. And that's like the Aura Ring is a fantastic example of how you could just make simple design decisions that really impact human health.
Like putting it in airplane mode
Yeah. Yeah.
before
Yes,
you
it
put it on your
collects
body.
data on airplane mode, which I don't think a lot of them do. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Right. The reason it's an option with the Aura Ring is because it'll just collect the data, whether it's connected or not.
Yep,
And that's why that was the design decision that made all the difference.
exactly.
Are you have the six that know about. There's a couple I'd like to ask you about. One, just quickly, we're both women and we have to dry our hair. There's a hair dryer that's low EMF.
Yes.
Can you tell us
Yes.
about that?
Well, it doesn't. So that is the EMF Freedom hair dryer by Shield
Okay.
Life,
Okay.
and this one it doesn't use any different technology than a regular hair dryer, but it's built with shielding incorporated into both the hair dryer itself and the power cord. And so, and this was actually something I learned from my father when we were writing Overpowered. I didn't realize hair dryers are not particularly big in my family. You might not be surprised to learn. But I learned from him that hair dryers are a tremendous source of radiation because it's because of the motor, right? I mean, they're plugged directly into the wall. It goes right to a motor that has to be really high powered in order to work. And then you're holding it right next to your head. Now, fortunately, you're not doing it for hours and hours at a time, but it's still a big dose. And
But
so
there
when
are
I found this,
hairdressers, right? There are
yeah, right,
hairdressers.
yeah, yeah.
That was coming
So
to
when
mind. I have a friend I would call her she's trying to be a quantum hairdresser. She wears blue blockers and does all these things that she can do, but she doesn't know about this technology.
yeah, so when I found this product, I reached out to the company, built a relationship with them, and added it to the store and then to the book because I knew that was actually an important use case. And I also know that a lot of people don't know. Even people who care about EMF don't know that this is an important use case. Even people who know about EMF and know it's an important use case don't know that a solution exists.
I know.
And that's a good example of one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book, because even if you know that you should be protecting yourself against EMF, you probably don't know nearly half of the product options that are out there and what is available now, right? The scope of products in my catalog now is so much bigger than it could have been even 5 years ago, much less 10 years ago when I started Shield Your Body. And the hair dryer the low EMF hair dryer is a really great example of that.
Yeah. They're even putting Bluetooth in. Like I saw the other day, popular hair dryer. So now we have this issue that we
Mm-hmm.
just learned about, but they have a Bluetooth in it so it can connect to an app. It's just like, so then you have the Bluetooth radiation as well.
Yeah. Well, they're doing that with everything now, right? Because you can get smart hairbrushes that track your follicular health, I imagine. Smart toothbrushes.
Right. Too much.
Yeah. I mean, there's literally smart tampons out there,
What?
But
and they're making everything smart. And I mean, like, so if you have a specific health condition, I'm trying to think of a really, really good example here, and I can't. But let's say you have something going on in your uterus, and you really need to keep a close eye on it, right? Then something like a smart tampon maybe is going to actually give you the data that you need in order just to keep an eye on things, and so that you don't have to keep going to the doctor every 2 weeks for a scan or whatever it might be. And the point I'm trying to make there is there can be actual use cases in which certain ones of these technologies are valuable to certain specific individuals. But that doesn't mean it's smart for everyone else to go out and get them, right? So I know from personal experience within my family, there are certain EMF emitting technologies that you just, when you need them, and you shouldn't shy away from them if you need them for another good example on this is some people need continuous glucose monitors. Some people don't. For some people, it's an option, but there
Hey,
are some people who need continuous glucose monitors.
Yeah, pace.
And yeah, or pacemakers. And today, these days, it's basically impossible to get either one of those without Bluetooth because that's just where the technology has gone. You technically don't need Bluetooth for these things to work, but there's no practical options out there without Bluetooth. And so for these people, I don't say, no, don't get the continuous glucose monitor or don't get the pacemaker. If a doctor is telling you to do that, you should do it and then focus your mitigation efforts in other areas of your life. Because, and this is expressed a few points in the book, and it's really important. Hitting zero is not and should not be your goal when it comes to EMF exposure.
yeah,
EMF exposure is a part of modern life. The goal is to eliminate the extraneous ones that don't add any value to your life or add insufficient value to justify the increased health risk from the exposure.
I love that you actually said, it broke me up. You said the only way you can do that is to have a Faraday tent in a desert.
Yeah,
Try and
and
live.
it's true. I mean, increasingly, even going to the desert isn't going to get right because Starlink will have internet coverage there.
Starlink.
Things like this. Yeah.
That
So
was the question.
that's why going to the Sahara alone isn't enough. That's why you need the Faraday tent in the Sahara.
That's right. Okay, Starlink. That was when we were just dreaming up questions before we'd read the book. That was the question we came up with. Partly because, I'm looking at different options for, my cottage property that just got, I was telling you before we started hit record that a large pine, think of the tallest pine you can imagine, old growth pine struck the roof. So we're talking about all different options and, what about Starlink if we have a new cottage and should we upgrade? And I don't know enough about it. I know that it's satellite based.
Hmm.
Do you, from your understanding, like I've actually gone in with meters and tried to test a friend's home that has Starlink, but she also lives ridiculously close to a cell tower, and she's got she's wondering, her health. She feels low energy, and I always wonder which of the two is doing this, and or possible. And is it your understanding, like that the level of EMF in the home with Starlink would be the same as Wi-Fi? Do you have any insight? Because I don't.
I, so I don't have Starlink.
No.
I have
Like, would
fiber,
you?
fortunately.
I
So,
was
but I
gonna say,
can
would you
say
have
when I
Starlink?
did live in the middle of nowhere, I
Okay.
did have satellite service because I needed internet, and it wasn't even as good as Starlink. It was
No.
Hughes, and it was just it's like they designed customer service to be the worst possible. Like it was intentional how Hughes designed their customer service to be so bad. But anyway, the point being, that's a really good example, right? If you need internet or even just really, really want it, because internet's really important and satellite is the only way to get it, or it's the only alternative to dial up where you live, then get it and then do it in the smartest way possible. And this is something either you could research or you could just talk to an EMF consultant. I talk about that in Empowered as well, about how you can find and productively work with certified EMF experts. But so for instance, the satellite itself needs to communicate, I'm sorry, the satellite dish needs to communicate with the satellite in space, but the satellite dish is also going to be sending radiation. Most of it will be going up, but some of it will be going down. So A, you want it as far away from your structure as possible. But then B, you want, if it's still high, you can still then put shielding on one side of it. Then you can also opt for a wired network instead of a wireless network inside the home, right?
Okay.
So you can use satellite to connect to Starlink and then have it power an Ethernet hardwired network in your home. Or if you really want Wi-Fi, go with one of the Wi-Fi protection options that I outline in the book. So there's all different ways that you can approach it. But if you can get fiber, get fiber. But for the people for whom Starlink and related technologies are useful, it is a tremendously important tool to have available because I firmly believe everyone should have access to the internet. And I know because I've lived in places like this, there's whole chunks of the country where you don't. And so Starlink and other related technologies make that possible. And it's possible to do it in a way that leads to less exposure. The reason I mentioned Starlink isn't because of the impact it'll have on your home when you install it. It's that it's literally blanketing the planet. I mean, I don't know how many satellites they're up to. They were talking about 40,000 as an interim goal. And they're not the only ones. Jeff Bezos
I know.
has a company that's doing this too. And so we're talking about tens and tens and tens of thousands of these things that, I mean, in order to provide that internet to anywhere you are on the planet, they have to be sending EMF down to anywhere that you are on the planet. That's
Right.
just how it works. And so that's the exposure that increasingly you just can't get away from. And
We
also
need
in,
another book on that. What is this, someone to start researching what is the safety of, 40,000 satellites in low Earth orbit, right? And
well,
what
so
safety
yeah, I mean,
of them being going up, like
that's the thing is that that's the way these technologies are deployed. People like to think that at least they're safe, right? If it's available, well, at least it's safe, or at least it's reasonably safe. But the thing is, with all of these technologies, they're released, and then we become the guinea pigs in the experiment. So we're not going to know what 20, I mean, and certain diseases that we care about here, right? From brain tumors to Alzheimer's and a whole slew of other ones, these diseases take 15, 20, 30 years to form. So it's in 15, 20, 30 years from now that we'll understand what today's exposures are doing. But at that point in time, the exposures will be much higher, and we'll have to wait another 30 years to know what the exposures of 2055 are causing. And so we are the experiment, and there are no unexposed populations anymore. There are populations with a lot less exposure, right? Like the Amish is a very commonly cited one because they don't have power and they don't use modern technology. And there's certain tribes, right, in Africa that similarly, like, they won't have cell phones if you go, or in the Amazon basin. So there are certain populations with a lot less exposure, but increasingly it's getting to the point where they don't have no exposure because just by living like the Amish, they go into town to sell their goods. And when they go into town, there's tons of cell towers there. They're passing by cell networks. They're riding their carriages next to cars that are transmitting software updates and autonomous driving data synchronization and all. And so even they are being exposed, just a lot less.
Okay, you just hit on something we talked beforehand that we absolutely want you to bring up. Can you talk a little bit about the rural areas, elevators, cars, and why that you think, oh well, I'm protected, I'm in a car, or I live far from a cell tower, for example, my cottage, right? No
Hmm.
Wi-Fi. I think, oh, this is my digital detox. But what you could be doing to radiate yourself quite highly in those areas.
Yeah, well, so this is true regardless of where you are, which is even with all this crap in the environment, it is often, and this is one of the core premises of the book and its approach to EMF mitigation, even if the background levels are really high, they're getting higher all the time, and you can feel like you're out of control, it is the tech that is closest to you, over which you have the most control, that can oftentimes be the biggest sources of your own exposure, right? So you can live in the city and think, oh God, there's 5 cell towers I can see right from my bedroom window. And God, this is awful. And then that same person is carrying their phone around in their pocket, right? And so if you're doing that, you're getting a huge dose. You're probably getting exposed to more radiation from your own cell phone than from those 5 towers combined. And it's because of how you are choosing to interact with your own technology. So when it comes to something like a car, right, these things have a tremendous amount of radiation emitting sources in them. From an EMF perspective, the only safe car is an old car, because the newer ones, a lot of people ask me about this because they're concerned about their Tesla or whatever their electric vehicle is. And sure, there's issues around that, but even on a conventional engine, a gas engine, if that car has Bluetooth and collision detection and in-car entertainment, and you can talk on the phone through the steering wheel, and these are just all examples of tech that is emitting a lot of EMF in your car. And the car itself it's not obviously a perfect Faraday cage, but it has a lot of the surface area functions like a Faraday cage, right? So you're in a metal tube that's going to be deflecting a lot of the radiation back into the interior of the car. It's the same with airplanes. When the airplane lands and they go over the speaker and said, okay, you can turn on your phones now, the radiation levels in the cabin explode because everyone is turning on their phones, and these you literally are in a metal tube, and so it's deflecting a huge amount of it back at you. When it comes to cars, the thing that I talk about in the book that I think surprises a lot of people is that there are absolutely no regulations governing how much radiation you can be exposed to in a car. And so there's no illegal amount. And because they're coming from all these different directions, it is very, very challenging, right? Because some's coming from the steering wheel, some's coming from the powertrain, some's coming from the entertainment system, some's coming from outside, and it's all bouncing around the cabin. It's not like you can just put a shield in and make it safe or even safer. And so there's almost nothing you can do in the context of a car except apparel. Yeah, right. Apparel. And there's a chapter on apparel and how it works. And apparel is really the only option for protecting yourself in the car. And I would say, even if you go into your car settings and disable a lot of these features, that's no guarantee that it's actually disabling them. Yeah, it could just be disabling your ability to use them. But this is one of those factors that don't get stressed about it, because there's nothing you can do. The goal isn't zero. There's nothing you can do. Stressing you out is just going to make everything worse for you. At a physiological level, it's going to increase your oxidative stress. And our goal here is to reduce your oxidative stress. So you shouldn't be increasing your oxidative stress because you're unable to reduce your oxidative stress.
Yeah.
But when it comes to rural areas, right, it's the same point as I started this very long and winding answer with, which is it's what you're doing with the tech near you, right? So if you live in a rural area, it's entirely likely, not certain, but likely, that there are very, very low background EMF levels. But again, if you have two Wi-Fi networks and your cell phone, and you do have a cell connection, but you're so far out, your phone only gets one bar. So right, because the fewer bars you have on your phone, the more radiation your phone is emitting, right? So you could live in an area with really low background levels of EMF and still have really high EMF exposure because of what you're doing with your tech. Another example that can impact anyone anywhere is wiring, right? Because electrical wiring can not only as obviously a conduit for EMF, but the way it is wired in a home can either increase or decrease the amount of EMF that the electrical system generates, right? If you have wires crossing over each other, that can lead to just unnecessarily high levels of EMF in your living room or right next to your head in your bedroom. And EMF exposure is not an aspect of building code anywhere in the United States. So they're never going to test for it. and it's in the wall, so you won't know to look for it unless you actually get a meter and start taking some measurements. And you can find these really surprising things where just like all of a sudden you realize, like, right behind your living room couch where you spend hours watching TV, there's a really high level of EMF coming from your wall. And so you could either hire somebody to fix that, or you don't feel like ripping out your wall. You realize, if I move my couch 2 feet to the right, my exposure is going to be way, way, way lower. And so that, and again, that can happen in an urban environment as well as in a rural environment. That could happen in the middle of an electrified hut in the Sahara, as it were. And so that's one of the examples I give to illustrate to people why it's so important to learn how to measure, to get a decent quality meter and learn how to measure. Because that's an example of an exposure you would never in a million years know about unless you actually took a meter to your environment.
Okay, before we talk about meters, before we get too far away from the car thing, I want you to talk about the hybrid car because you had said something specific about hybrid cars and how they're worse. Can you
Yeah,
explain?
so hybrid cars, so with this, again, we're talking just about the powertrain, right? Because if it's a Bluetooth stereo, that'll be the same Bluetooth stereo in the Prius or in the Model S, right? So
Exactly.
we're talking here about the powertrain, and people just implicitly think that electric cars are worse EMF emitters, but actually it is hybrid cars that are worse EMF emitters. And that is because they have an inverter, because hybrid cars are built to be able to convert forms of energy. And whenever you're converting forms of energy, you need an inverter. And inverters are really, really high sources of EMF. This is true in a hybrid car. It's true in your solar power system at your home. It's true, by the way, in your cell phone charger, right? Because cell phone chargers take AC power and convert it into DC power. They're lower powered than your whole solar home power system. But the point is, there's inverters in a lot of different places. And when you have a Prius, the inverter is right under your butt.
Okay. Yeah, and that would go for like a camper or a camper van. They all have inverters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but it is possible, right? So, like for a camper or an off grid home, right? It is possible. This takes time, effort, and money, but it is possible to build like an off grid home that runs purely on DC. And then you get only, in terms of electrical appliances, you get only DC appliances. And these exist. They exist for the RV crowd and the off grid crowd.
Yep.
And if you do that, then you don't need actually an inverter on your solar power system, because your solar power system is generating DC and your home is using DC. Even if you're storing it in batteries, the batteries are storing it in DC. So you don't need an inverter in that setup at all. And you can do the same thing in an RV. But in general, most people aren't going to do that because your options for appliances are much more limited, and it's just expensive to do that.
Yeah.
But anybody with electro hypersensitivity, like there's just no option. The dirty
Right.
electricity
Well,
coming
right, exactly.
so
And
overwhelming.
I know people who live in Greenbank who, I mean, they're just using propane.
Yeah, that's our cottage
Yeah.
that was hit by a tree. But we are looking at the solar, and my he's on it. He's on the DC, that option. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Can I go back to the rural story?
Sure.
So I do some EMF mitigation. I am not certified. I'm trained, but I can help a lot of people with some of the big things. And you have a whole chapter on meters, which I thumbs up on all your recommendations. I've got several of those meters. I was using the Safe and Sound Pro, and sure
Hmm.
enough, their couch right behind I'm like, what the heck? This is ridiculous. Like, I can't believe their head would be, the level was off the chart. And sure enough, their Wi-Fi router was behind the wall.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, because that would be RF
It was RF.
radiation. Yeah.
Yes, it wasn't electric or magnetic, but they're still solving the issue. They did move the couch, a little bit. They tried to move the router as far as they could, but that brings me to the next question. I forget which chapter, you already mentioned which chapter it was, 13, I think. Of the 8 gadgets, you do mention some options for a lower EMF router. And I
Yeah.
know one of them is the signal tamer. I have it. It's like a bag. We
Hmm.
help to mitigate. My dad has a, just for people to picture this, my dad has his Wi-Fi router underneath his TV, and then it's, sitting quite close to it. And so we did put that on to at least lower it down.
Yeah.
But can you tell us about, is it JRS? I
Yes.
don't know anything about
So,
this.
yeah, and so your listeners understand this is necessary, right? Even if you want to keep Wi-Fi, your Wi-Fi router is overpowered, right? Because these Wi-Fi routers are designed around a certain standard, right? So that you can put it in a 2,500 square foot office with 100 employees and they can all share the network. That same router you're putting in your home where maybe there's 4 of you living, and it's not a 2,500 square foot footprint. Maybe it's a 1,200 square foot footprint or 1,500. But your Wi-Fi router is emitting enough power to do that whole big. And so for people who live in apartment buildings, this is exactly why you see your neighbors' Wi-Fi networks, because they are emitting so much power, the network extends beyond the apartment. And so this is an example of technology that is designed to be overpowered because they're designing without regulatory pressure for a lowest common denominator. So that means you could have a Wi-Fi router emitting a lot less power and still enjoy Wi-Fi. And the simpler option there, like you were just saying, is the signal tamer, which is like a sleeping bag you put over your router, and then you kind of roll it up bit by bit, like hiking a skirt, and until you have enough coverage that you're happy, like, okay, this gives me enough coverage in my house, and you keep it, and you've really cut the amount of radiation that you're being exposed to while still using Wi-Fi. But then we get to the JRS, which is a fantastic piece of technology. It's invented by this Dutch fellow, Dr. Jan Rutger Schrader, whom I've had on my podcast as well. So if anyone wants to hear like an in-depth interview with him, that's on the Healthier Tech podcast, because he explains in a lot of detail what I'm about to really summarize. But
Okay.
he's designed a Wi-Fi router that emits 90% less radiation when you're using it and 0 radiation when you're not using it. And so this is, again, another example of how these things are just emitting way too much power. Your Wi-Fi router is constantly emitting this radiation, even if nothing in your home is connected to it, right? Because that's just how it's designed. It doesn't have to, right? They could design it a little bit differently without any hardware changes, just different software, and it would then not be doing this. But so what JR did is he changed that assumption. And so now when nothing is connected to it, it's not emitting any radiation. And when something is connected to it, it's emitting 90% less radiation. And he has a power dial on the side. So instead of having to use a signal tamer to adjust how much radiation is blasting, so you can adjust your coverage area, with the JRS, you can just turn a knob until you're getting coverage in enough of your house, and then you've reduced the power. So, and those are just 3 examples. He did a lot of design work to get and this came to him. He got into this because he used to be a software engineer, and he developed radiation sickness after they installed a Wi-Fi router above his head at work. And he had to quit his job, and he decided, I want to design a better router. And it is a remarkable piece of technology. I love talking about this one. I think it's one of those things where people just don't know that it exists. And when they learn about it in the book, I think it's going to be very, very popular, because it is one where you can make a huge difference in your own exposure with literally 0 impact on the way you use the technology, right? Because with the JRS, you still have full Wi-Fi. You're not turning it off you can turn it off at night. That's another one of his features. He has a nice integrated timer, but you can use it the exact same way that you're using your current router. No changes to your life in any way, and you've made a huge difference in your exposure.
Because for me right now, when everybody's gone out of the house, I get all excited and I turn the Wi-Fi off and I think, oh, we're, my little digital detox. But then I, will get my phone out, like, oh, I need to download that episode. So then I turn it back on to do that. Or YouTube, and I think, oh, well, it's just a little bit of data. But then I'm radiating myself more, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm in a rural area, no Wi-Fi now because I've turned it off. So it's just, so that would take that thought process out, right? And
Yes, it would. And also, you just got to plan your downloads better.
yeah,
But
I
I do
do.
that too, man. For me, the thing is podcasts. So
I apparently we have the
because I don't
similar
just turn off Wi-Fi at night. I turn off internet at night. And so even my hardwired network is asleep when I'm asleep. So, but if I want to listen to, after I turn everything off, let's say I still have to clean up the kitchen or something, I'm going to put on a podcast. And so I make sure that my queue of downloaded podcasts is always ready for me.
Me too. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I've heard you say that you have a podcast addiction,
Yeah.
and yeah, we share
And my
that.
Kindle too. My Kindle. So
Oh,
I put my Kindle online maybe 3 or 4 times a year, and I'll download like 30 or 40 books, and then that's it. And so my Kindle is never emitting any
right.
substantial levels of EMF, and
Yeah.
the battery lasts for friggin' ever, right? Because that's a huge drain on a Kindle battery is the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And so the Kindle's another one where I just download everything in one batch and I keep it in my bed. I know even with these precautions, I shouldn't be sleeping with my Kindle, but I just love reading to go to
Oh,
bed.
you shouldn't.
Yeah, no, but I did recently upgrade to a newer model, and the reason was because of the amber mode. Because my older one, because I'm a big fan of using technology as long as you possibly can. I've had 2 cell phones in the last 11 years, but so I was using my Kindle, and then someone told me about amber mode, and I was like, oh, I guess I need a new one. So do you know what I'm talking about with amber mode?
Yeah, would that be the same as the daylight computer in terms of no?
Yeah, I believe it is the same.
Okay.
And so, but it goes because my old one had no blue light control at all. So
Mhm.
at night, I would just
Oh,
make it
that
as
was a good
dim as
upgrade.
possible. But this new one has this awesome amber mode. So it's always in amber mode, basically all day long. I love it.
Good. Yeah. Do
Sorry, I
you
didn't
fall
mean to
asleep?
turn this
Yeah.
into a Kindle sales session. This is
No,
all
do you fall
about, but
asleep
it's a
with
good
that?
example of how, I'm not one of these people. Hey, fortunately, I don't have electrical sensitivity like particularly, I believe everyone is electrically sensitive. I feel it's difficult for me to spend too much time in cities anymore. But in general, I wouldn't consider myself electrically sensitive. So I don't have to take a lot of these extra precautions. I take what I believe are sensible precautions that average consumers would actually be comfortable with if they knew about them. But I don't even aim for a zero EMF lifestyle. But so I do use a cell phone, but it's in airplane mode almost all the time,
My,
unless I need it not to be. I use a Kindle. It's in airplane mode almost all the time. I have Wi-Fi in my house, even though I also have a wired network for various, like because I have 2 Wi-Fi networks from 2 different internet service providers. And so when I do interviews like this, if one of them starts to choke, I'm able to switch very quickly over to the other, which I just can't do on my wired network. And so there's just reasons I do this stuff, but then I still take what I believe are sensible, basically zero cost precautions in how I use these technologies. And that's so this book, Empowered, it can definitely help you if you are sensitive to EMF exposure. But this book can also help you if you consider yourself just an average consumer with no specific EMF sensitivities, but you want to be healthier about it. And you can take, the steps in whatever order you feel comfortable doing, empowered with the knowledge of, what these sources are and how to figure out where your biggest ones are and how you should be focusing your efforts and what you can accomplish through behavioral change before even thinking about investing in products and so on and so forth.
well, let's go there because chapter 8, chapter 9, I think are really key chapters in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So You really, thank you so much for talking about asking people to evaluate their relationship with their phone. And it hit home actually, reading it, I have to say. I have, if you don't mind, I'm going to read a quote. Is that okay?
Sure.
From
Yeah.
the book. Okay. For many people, the phone has become become a, what's the word? Default companion. We reach for it when we are bored, anxious, lonely, or even just, I can't read my writing here, something standing in line. It fills the silence, it ends conversations prematurely, interrupts the quiet moments where reflection and regeneration might occur. I thought that was really powerful. It hit home. I thought, yeah, I'm one of those
Oh,
people that
thank you.
pulls out my phone when I stand in line. I'm like, oh, well, I could just get a couple things done, or check this out or
I
get the
totally
number.
do the same thing. I believe everyone, almost everyone, and I mean that as close to literally as I possibly could. Almost everyone has an unhealthy relationship with their phone. The phone is it is a source of so many toxic forces, right? So obviously, when I'm interviewed, we talk a lot about EMF, but you could just as easily
Oh, we
these
lost
technology.
sound.
I'm sorry.
Oh, we lost your sound for a second.
Oh, I'm
Sort
sorry. Where was I?
About 4 words ago.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it is a source of so many toxic forces.
Yeah.
So blue light, which is a form of EMF, but
Yes.
then the way in which I think I have to switch networks.
Yeah, you went out again. Just before you said so many forms of blue light, we missed something there.
Am I back?
Yep.
You're back?
Okay. See, I was just saying how sometimes I need to switch networks in the middle of interviews, and there you go.
That was meant to happen.
Let me take that answer from the top. So, well, after everything I said about everyone having an unhealthy
Yeah.
relationship with phones, I believe that's
So
true. I believe a lot of people know this too. It's not like if you point it out, they deny it because everyone kind of already knows it. And so we were talking about EMF and blue light, which is a kind of EMF. But if you listen to Tristan Harris and the Center for Humane Technology, he's the former Facebook engineer who will talk about how these technologies are designed from the ground up to hijack dopamine systems in order to get you addicted and spending as much time on these things as possible. That's why the notification systems on your phones work the way that they work. Then that's before you even get into the impact of the algorithms on social platforms, how they are designed to amplify toxically extreme voices, because that also promotes engagement. And just as an example, I don't have the scientific citation on me, but there is at least one study that I'm aware of that has demonstrated that sleeping with your phone, even if it is fully powered off, right? So you're not getting any notifications, you're not getting any EMF, but so fully powered off, that is going to harm your sleep. That will negatively impact your sleep. And they theorize, they postulate that it is because having it near you has already trained you to expect the potential dopamine release of some notification happening.
No way.
And so and more science is coming out on these topics all the time. And so when it comes to issues around your phone, I like if you look, phone use is linked with increased anxiety. How much of that is caused by EMF? How much of that is caused by blue light? How much of that is caused by sleep disruption from EMF? How much of that is caused by just how effed up Facebook is, right? How much, and you, it get it. So at that point, it becomes very, very difficult, almost impossible to tease apart the sources and instead just to realize, well, the phone is pretty effing toxic. Now, that's not to say phones are bad, right? Phones are amazing. What they have done in terms of A, just keeping us connected, B, my ability to run a business formerly as a digital nomad. I'm settled now, but I spent a lot of time effectively homeless, but called a digital nomad because that makes it sound a lot better. I know that I learned Spanish a lot faster because Duolingo gamified the thing on my phone instead of making me go sit down on my computer and load up the browser and do, right? Because Duolingo was able to hijack these same forces for what I believe is a force of good, at least in terms of my own personal goals, right? So these are all just examples. There's a lot of the fact that phones are very, very positive things too, but at the same time, we have to realize they are incredibly toxic. And so that's why I want people to, and that's why that chapter exists, because the phones are huge sources of EMF, and they are huge sources of just toxicity in our lives. And so, but in order for people to have less EMF exposure from their phone, they need to take a more mindful approach to their overall relationship with their phone. And so that's why I spend so much. I mean, that's not only why I spend all that time in that chapter, which is chapter 9, how to use your phone more safely, but it's also why I started the Healthier Tech podcast. It's why I acquired Bagby, which makes we make
Sleeping bag.
The sleeping bag for your phone, and the analog EMF free silent alarm clock for bedrooms, because I believe in this topic in particular very, very strongly, that not only that people have almost everyone has an unhealthy relationship with their phone, and almost everyone realizes it.
Yeah.
Andeea is really involved in the addiction world.
Oh, right. I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. And you have a product called MindSight Phone Lock Box.
Mm-hmm.
Is this for the worst addicts? And can you describe what it is?
I don't know if it has to be for the worst addicts. So I learned about this type of product on my podcast. I was interviewing somebody that the topic was digital detox, and he told me that one of the ways because he went on a full-on digital detox, but then since then he's tried to do kind of mini digital detoxes in his life, and he was talking about a timed safe for his phone. And that was the first I'd heard about this kind of product. And then I discovered MindSight, which makes one of these. And so I built a relationship with MindSight. And so now they're in the Shield Your Body store too. And it's a really cool concept. There's 2 sizes, basically, one for one phone and one for 3 or 4 phones, depending on how big your phones are. And what you can do is put your phone in it and lock it. And you can set a timer on it so that even if you're driven to get your phone, you can't for like half an hour or 2 hours or 12 hours, right? Because you've set the timer. And it is a great way to enforce a phone-free quiet time for yourself and your family. And so I love that kind of product. That is not a shielded product. That's not an EMF shielding thing. But it is, I believe, an EMF protection thing, because anything that gets you to use your phone less is reducing your EMF exposure.
So it could theoretically ring, right? Because it's not shielded. And that would have you'd be like, I gotta answer. Or I guess you could hear your notifications, but you'll have to learn.
Yeah.
Because you have to wait till the time's out.
Yeah. Although, you can contact the company for an emergency escape code. And so that's their number one source of customer support demand. And is people like, give me the code.
Bare phone or what?
Yeah, I guess they have to go to someone else's phone or a computer, but yeah.
It's like I take care of dogs on the side, and recently I've had people are bringing these electronic fences, so they make me download the app on the phone, and then they put the GPS of my house. So I've got this electronic fence around so this is like the electronic fences for our phones that humans need, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think people, once they try to use this product, it will really illuminate for them how much they need this product. Because I remember once I went on a digital detox, but I downloaded music to my phone. I wanted music. I was in the middle of nowhere. I wanted music. So I used my phone for music. So I downloaded a bunch of music And so just so I could have music playing on this digital detox. And right, because you can set your own rules for your own digital detox. You don't have to be a monk about it. And this is when it really hit me how much I needed a digital detox. Is I was just sitting in a chair listening to some music, and I reached over to my phone to check WhatsApp. And I'm like, wait, I have no signal, no service. WhatsApp isn't going to work. Like, why did I just do that by reflex? And that was when I realized I had a problem.
You
Yeah.
and everybody, especially our kids.
But it was just so ingrained. Like it wasn't a conscious thing. I just did it. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, if people try it out, like let's say you just want to watch a movie on Netflix or whatever. So you put it in the lockbox for the duration of the movie. I guarantee you put your phone in the lockbox for the duration of the movie. I guarantee you're going to enjoy the movie more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So true.
Sure.
Oh, Andeea, I could literally pick your brain forever. Andea's gonna say this time, right? I think
We're getting there.
you were getting there.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to ask, Laura, before we?
I could I could ask so much more, but I think what I need to say is there's so much more to the book that we haven't even touched on, like things like EMF scams and how to shop smart, why many anti-radiation products do more harm than good. I just want to, maybe if we don't talk about it, it's going to entice people.
Hey, this is exactly why people need to get the book. And so, why don't we just go right into that? Like, when's the book coming out and all that?
Yeah. So the book is out. It came out on September 15th.
Oh, hang on,
And,
but it's not
and
September 15th yet.
It will be when we air this.
Oh, yes, this is very true.
yeah, so the
Thank you.
book is out. It's called Empowered. At launch, it's only available at Amazon. That is because I just want to make people get it at Amazon to help improve the sales rank. Oh, later on, it'll be available on other platforms. It is available in Kindle, paperback, and hardcover. There will be an audiobook, but that's coming later. And for the next, I believe from here, it's 5 days, right? Because it just launched 2 days ago. So for the next 5 days, it's at special launch pricing. So the Kindle version is only 99 cents. And I forget the paperback and hardcover pricing. The paperback is something like $7.50. It's the cheapest it's ever going to be. It's the minimum price that Amazon is allowing me to charge for it, basically, for the first 7 days. And after that, the price goes up to what will be normal. So until the 22nd, if you get Empowered, you can get it at a really good price. There's the link where you can find all this information is shieldyourbody.com/empowered. And so that will have all the links to all the different versions. And when the audiobook comes out, that'll be there. When it's on Barnes & Noble and Apple Books, it'll be there as well. So that's the link, is shieldyourbody.com/empowered. And if you're interested in the book, now is a fantastic time to get it because of the launch pricing special.
Amazing. Thank you for that.
Super.
So generous.
Well, no, and thank you both for having me back and allowing me to help spread the word about this new book. It took me over 2 years to write. I'd hoped for it to come out in 2024, and as I got closer and closer to September 2024, I just gave up. And then, so it took another year to finish, and it was a lot more work. I mean, it took a lot more work to write this than Overpowered. And that, I think, in part is because Overpowered was really, because my father knew exactly what he wanted to say, so it was up to me just to write it well. But B, it was just explaining the science. Not that that's a small task, but it was like you read the science and then you figure out how to explain it. For this, I had to kind of synthesize a tremendous amount of thinking that I've done over the past decade about what here is actually important. How would I explain these concepts where in many cases there are no clean or easy or answers? How would I get it? So it was really a process of self-discovery and exploration, as well as because I thought I knew everything I wanted to say until I sat down to try to say it. And then I realized, like, no, I can't say it. No. So it took 2 years, and now it's out. And it's such a relief. And thank you so much to both of you for having me back to talk about it.
Oh, awesome.
Well, we're not done yet because two things have to happen. We have to ask you, we have a signature question, which you answered before, but we just want to put a twist on it. What does
Okay.
EMF healthy mean to you?
It's first off awareness of, you know, like we talked about, what are the sources of these exposures? Because that's the first step to doing anything about it. And then cutting out the extraneous exposures, because all of us have a lot of them. There's a lot that you can do. And so, yeah, I just want people to know that there's a lot that they can do without spending any money, without sacrificing their enjoyment of technology. In fact, a lot of these tactics will save you money because you won't be getting the smart version of something. You'll realize a regular old doorbell will work just fine for you, or
Yeah.
a regular thermostat will work just fine for you. And so you're saving money on the product and on the energy required to power the product. So there's just like, yeah, so that's what EMF health, was it? EMF, no,
Healthy.
yeah, that's what it means is, oh, and I'm sorry this is going on, but I would say it's also having an innate understanding that zero isn't the goal. And so, because otherwise you're pursuing an unrealistic outcome and you're setting yourself up for frustration and failure. And that's not a healthy way to approach anything. So doing the things that you can do, it's sort of like the serenity prayer, right? God, give me the wisdom
God,
to
grant me
to to
the
do.
things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Thank you. Yes. And so it's the same with EMF. There's certain things you can do, there's certain things you can't do. So just be chill about it and do what you can do.
I think that zero is not the goal is huge. Huge takeaway here.
Hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got a few things just to finish up.
Okay.
We cannot, we can't do justice to how powerful this interview was, the guidance that you gave us. So I just have, this came up for me. I feel like you're a walking encyclopedia on non-native electromagnetic frequencies. And that's, because you co-wrote the book with your dad. And like you said, there were, you grew up at the dinner table, learning things, at home and being questioned where we weren't, right?
Mhm.
Thank you for capturing all of this in one book. I just want to say, don't worry about the time it took. It's going to be, from what I've read of it, which is about 3/4, it's worth the wait. And something you didn't mention here is the introduction at the beginning. I don't think you mentioned that
Oh,
by
the forward, you
the
mean?
forward by your
Yeah.
dad. Oh
Yeah.
my, that's like, it's fantastic. We won't mention anything. Let's let people buy the book and read that.
My father, who passed away in 2018, when I joined him to work on Overpowered, there was just a lot of stuff he wrote that we couldn't use. And so I went back through it and found a part that I think really fits the book very well. And so posthumously, I present a foreword from my father, Dr. Martin Blank.
Thank you for that. Yeah, just you also, we didn't cover it at all, but you had a chapter on building resilience.
Hmm.
I, a while ago, built a whole workshop on building resilience to non-native electromagnetic frequencies. So if you want a third book, reach out and we should
Okay,
collaborate because that
sounds
would bring
good.
in the quantum biology part into it. But yeah, it was good to see that really comprehensive book. Thank you for showing the world in this book and also with your company, Shield Your Body, that technology can be made safer without sacrificing functionality. I know that's really big to you. And you've just, again, thank you for some consistent key messages here. Andeea brought out one of them, the idea of not going to zero, but cell phone radiation testing is flawed. Reminding our listeners that the most dangerous EMF is allowing a cell phone on the body and working on that relationship to the phone. Relying on self-policing by manufacturers is actually risky. We didn't get into that so much, but that's a big part of the book. The science that shows non-thermal exposures are not harmless. So those are key messages, I think. Thank you for bringing those out. All of us in the safe technology world are grateful. And finally, for not mincing your words, as you said today, for being a fearless AF, honest, conscious CEO who tells you first how to reduce EMF freely before selling his own shielding products. And that really says it all right there.
Well, thank you. That was very sweet. It means a lot to me to hear those words. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, R, for being here. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We will see you next time. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this podcast. We want to thank our sponsor, VIVARAYS, who allows for us to get this information to you. They offer top-of-the-line blue blocking glasses, which, as we know, are critical for our health these days for blocking artificial light at night. Over 90% of our time is spent indoors under artificial lights, and this puts us all prone to circadian rhythm disruption. You can use the code QUANTUMHEALTHY for a discount. Link is in the show notes.
Thank you so much for listening to the Quantum Healthy podcast. We hope you found some value in this information. And if you feel inspired, please share it and leave us a 5-star review. This will help us reach so many more people. If you want to connect with Laura, you can find her at laurakistmanwellness.com and Andeea at andeearay.com. Links are below in the show notes. Now, go find some sunlight and embrace your own quantum healthy.